It's many years ago now since I was driving along the Ballymother Road and I met the late John James Patterson coming out through the hedge with a spade in one hand and a sack in the other. And I stopped and asked him, "John, are you busy?" And he said, "I was very busy. I was making a conservation area here on the farm to be a kind of bird sanctuary and a little lake and a couple of islands." And he asked me why. And I said, "Well, I'm going down to the Orange Hall at Lone Ends to start to pack up stuff to take to help people in Russia." And he said, "I'll come with you and help you." And he just stepped into my car and off we went. And we worked together at Lone Ends for the next 14 years. He was with me almost every day at some part of the day and often throughout the day and until late at night. And we packed up thousands and thousands of boxes to send to the poor and the needy and the destitute and to spread the message of the gospel. And I often come here to John's Pond to remember him. I still think about him every single day of my life. And often I come here and sit and remember how much he loved this place. It always charmed him when he was here by this pond that he made, when he'd hold out a few crumbs in his hand and the robins would come down and sit on the palm of his hand to take the crumbs. And he was so in tune with nature, and it's wonderful that he made such a place as this that we can continue to enjoy even although he is no longer with us.
It was the memory of John James Patterson and his dedication to the needs of others less fortunate that inspired Ronnie McCracken to do something tangible in Ethiopia: the building of a school. Ethiopia, the nation, or as it's properly known, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, lies just north of Kenya on the Horn of Africa.
It's a country of great contrasts. There are about 80 million people who live in Ethiopia and about 80 different language groups, many tribal groups, so it's a lot of contrast. It's a country with a great history and a great heritage, and yet today it's a country of absolute poverty.
Everybody knows the exotic name of Ethiopia's capital city, Addis Ababa, but not many know how to find it on a map, or how big it is, or how large its population, or what its people are like. It is one of the oldest sites of human existence known to man, and its recorded history goes back to at least the time of King Solomon.
During that time when King Solomon was very powerful, he had a navy in the Red Sea at Zion Geber, today Eilat, and he sent those ships to bring back gold and ivory and peacocks, and had trading missions. And I think that a lot of the local people in Ethiopia were exposed to Judaism in those days and converted to Judaism.
Ethiopia was part of the ancient kingdom of Sheba, and the Bible records the visit of the Queen of Sheba to King Solomon. Legend records that from their liaison a child was born, and one of his descendants became Haile Selassie, the last king of Ethiopia. This visit of the Queen to King Solomon and to Israel also had a more lasting effect on Ethiopia and its people.
Ethiopia then did become a very, very Jewish kind of influenced society. And then I think when the Ethiopian eunuch went to Jerusalem, he was converted on his way home through Philip the Evangelist and was baptized. He then brought this message of Christianity, this new message, back to the people in Ethiopia, and many people converted to Christianity. And in those early days of the Judeo-Christians in the first 3 centuries, There was a colossal movement in Ethiopia, and over time that has become maybe more traditional. The Orthodox Church has perhaps lost the evangelical edge of their faith, but still there's a very deep religious faith in Ethiopia until today.
Christianity, of one sort or another, is still the majority religion in Ethiopia, but there is also a very large and growing Muslim minority, about 30%.
Also, since the fall of the communist government about 20 years ago, the evangelical church has kind of exploded in Ethiopia, and there are huge evangelical churches now, some with thousands of members.
In 1974, Haile Selassie was deposed and the monarchy abolished. A communist regime took over but lasted less than 20 years. The country is now a federal republic and the second most populated nation on the continent of Africa. It has more than 80 million people in an area of around 500,000 square miles. Despite being the major source of the Nile, Ethiopia has suffered frequently from drought. In the 1980s, a series of famines affected more than 8 million people and left 1 million dead. The indescribable hardship and sorrow that accompanied the famines was much publicised worldwide and was one of the main reasons for the fall of the communist system. As in many underdeveloped countries, there is great need in Ethiopia today. The people are poor, the economy is poor, and for many, prospects of any kind are less than hopeful. One of the most urgent needs and one of the best ways of helping is to provide better education, and so the idea of a school was born. Having the idea is the easy bit. Making it happen is quite different. First, how do you pay for it?
One day, in a flash of inspiration, or some said madness, I'm not quite sure which, I decided that I would put myself forward to go on a sponsored trek to the base camp of Mount Everest. And I asked friends if they would kindly sponsor me to do that, and the sponsorship would go entirely to building the school in Ethiopia. And I succeeded to reach the base camp and to come back in one piece. And it was an awesome experience to be there and to see the towering mountains. And through that, we raised sufficient money to build the school in Ethiopia. And then the next step was to go to Ethiopia to actually be involved in the building of the school. Oh, that's the block quarry. So we collected a team of friends from Northern Ireland and one from England who were willing to go out. There were just 7 of us, and we went out to Addis Ababa to begin the actual work of building. Building materials were difficult to find. The methods were quite different from what we were used to using here, but we succeeded with all of that. They'd kind of promised us that when we would arrive on the scene, the foundations would be installed and the upright columns would be in place. But actually, when we got there, we found what was just practically still a green field. And in order to make the foundations, we had to dig rocks out of the hills nearby. And the Africans carried those rocks in and then smashed them with a sledgehammer to spread out for the hard core, and poured the concrete on top of that. And that was a little bit of a shock for us. One of my friends who was there to help us looked around the site and said to me, "Ronnie, where are the blocks for building?" And I said, "Don't worry, they promised me, that they'll be here that Monday morning." I said, "They promised me they'll be here this morning." And he said, "I suppose the block lorry will arrive in a few minutes, with the crane to lift them off." And about 10 minutes later, when I looked down the road, I saw the blocks arriving. There was no lorry, there was no crane. What we had were 2 little ponies that were drawing what I would call a gig, like a 2-wheeled cart, and they had the blocks piled up on the back of those things. In fact, I noticed that the weight of the blocks at times was so heavy on the back that the pony's hooves were lifting off the ground when they'd hit a bump. You know, the poor thing was running in midair. And those two little ponies with their gigs brought in 8,000 concrete blocks for us to build with. So they all had to be loaded by hand and unloaded by hand, which meant there was a great deal more hard physical labour involved even than there would be in such a project here. There was a kind of a blockworks not too far away, within about maybe half a mile. I did make the mistake one day of volunteering to go there to help with the loading and got onto the gig. I very soon discovered that the gigs were without any suspension. So of course every bump they hit I was up in the air and clinging on for all I was worth. And when we got there we found that they were trying to make blocks with a fairly antiquated machine and had them spread out to dry, and we piled them up and brought them back, and the journey back was worse than the journey out because this time we're sitting on top of the blocks and bouncing around as well. But backwards and forwards all day, those men and ponies moved, bringing the blocks in, which was quite a sight to see. We brought a few spirit levels with us from Northern Ireland, and we had a couple of reasonably experienced builders there and a few handymen like myself and one solicitor from London who'd never been in a building site in his life. But between us we managed, and we had a couple of very good African bricklayers as well. They worked hard, they were very good. They wouldn't worry very much about spirit levels and you know, trying to keep the line straight and things like that. So we had to persuade them a wee bit on that score. But yes, when you look along the long length of the main back wall of the school building, you can see it's perfectly straight. We kept asking the local pastor, let's go and rent the cement mixer. It'll be so much quicker and so much easier. And he kept saying, no, too expensive. We can't spend so much money. Let's hire a few of the local ladies and they'll be glad to get a few pence every day. So they came and we worked together with them. Those women worked extremely hard. And then they when they had it mixed, they carried it because there was no such thing as a wheelbarrow. Here we'd shovel it into the wheelbarrow and wheel it around. There they had just two straight shafts with a piece of corrugated iron, and everything was thrown on top, and the two women carried that between them. Everything was a problem. Nothing was easy to your hand. For example, we needed a ladder. You had to make it out of eucalyptus poles. You needed scaffolding as the walls got higher. We had to just make our own because there was no proper scaffolding, and it was quite a rickety apparatus. A few pieces of shuttering iron set across concrete blocks and quite wobbly. And it's one of the things that I do actually very much thank the Lord for, that we got through the whole project, we built the school, we completed the building, and no one was injured in any way. Not even minor cuts or bruises, so it was really quite something, and we thank God for that. We did have a few officials who came from the Department of Education. And when they came in, they asked me, how long have you been here? And I said, less than 3 weeks. And they said, what? Oh, if the Ethiopians had been doing this on their own, they wouldn't be to this level in 5 years. So I think that what happened really was that when the local people saw how hard we were working, they said, we'll not be outdone by these white people, we'll work as hard. One of the helpers there, one young man called Tashome, who was bricklayer, who was joiner, who was painter. He did every job. He was receiving, he told me, for his wages, 100 Ethiopian birr per day. And it cost him 50 Ethiopian birr for his transportation backwards and forwards. It cost him another 40 to buy his lunch. So at the end of the day, for all his hard work, he was left with 10 Ethiopian birr, which at that moment in time was worth about 35 pence. And that was for working brutally hard from morning until night. He didn't have enough for a second meal, just one meal a day. And it's rather sad. He was a very talented, capable builder. He could turn his hand to almost anything, that boy. And yet he was getting so little reward for his labour, which is very sad. When I was a schoolboy, my one ambition was to leave. I really hated school in those days. And when I finally left Mount Collier School in the Tigers Bay area of North Belfast, on my way home, walking down the old limestone road, on the left-hand side there was an old clay pit where they used to make ceramic tiles and building bricks and things. And I remember taking my bag of school books and throwing it over the wall and saying, that's it, I'm free, I'm finished with school. But when we were working in Ethiopia in the big feeding project, they took us one day to visit a small church which had a school. And when I saw the conditions there, I was so challenged by them. And I just felt we've got to do something. So we kind of tried to take on the support for 12 of the children there, pay their school fees and provide food and clothing and school books and to help their families a little bit. And then as a result of that, the government, seeing some improvement for a number of the children, decided to donate a site for a new school and gave 3,000 square metres of land. And at that point then the people in the church there came on to me and said, can you help us? And we took on the challenge to try to find the way to build this school. First of all, the main school building that we built contains 4 classrooms, and each classroom will house about 60 children, 3 children to a desk. Now, people in Northern Ireland tend to react when they hear that and say, 60 children and 1 teacher? But actually, the average in the state schools in Ethiopia is between 90 and 120 children to a classroom. So 60, it's like just half the number. That's gives them a much better chance to have some education. That building we have now completed. The school has been opened and it's operating, and people are very, very happy with that. On the same compound, they had a very primitive kind of toilet facility, just a corrugated iron shack. It was unspeakable. So one day we decided to demolish the old toilet block and to build them a new one. So we also installed a brand new toilet block with a water tank, place where they could wash their hands, the basic facilities that every human being should have, but that didn't exist. And also on the site there is a small church, just a corrugated iron shed. And the church is also being used, like we had there the first adult education seminar, because school is for children, but there are many, many adults in Ethiopia who can't read or write, and they need to be educated. So we held the first adult education seminar, brought a doctor to speak to them about the dangers of HIV or how to live when they've contracted that in the best possible way. And we brought somebody from the social welfare department to speak to them, and then we brought one pastor to preach the gospel to them in the people there speak a language called Oromia or Oromafia, so he came to preach them in Oromia, and that was the first time there'd been such an adult education program. But that will be an ongoing thing as well. We would still ultimately at some point in the future need to see built there 2 more rooms for the teachers and a room for a library, kitchen, that kind of thing. So there is still considerable work that would need to be done there. I also have a great burden on my heart for the mentally and physically handicapped, for whom there's virtually no facility whatsoever that I could find. And I think it would be fantastic if there could be like a special section for Down syndrome and autistic children, people like that, for whom there's a great need. Often in Ethiopia, those kind of children are killed by their parents, which is appalling. We returned to Ethiopia for a special opening ceremony. And for me it was a great and special thrill that 2 of John James Patterson's daughters came out, Jacqueline and Amanda, with their husbands, to cut the ribbon and to declare the school open and to lay a special memorial stone. I have to confess that when we put that stone, it said, erected by the Eshcol Trust of Northern Ireland in memory of John James Patterson, and the date, and then a true friend. I had to shed a few tears at that point as we did that, and when people came with a few flowers and put them on the memorial stone, was very, very touching indeed to think that far away in Ethiopia, John James Patterson was being remembered for the heart of love that he had for people, for children, and for sending help to thousands of people that he never once ever saw in his life. So that was a particular thrill. And I can remember when I got the first computer in my house. My wife told, "What do you want with that thing? Why are you wasting your time with a computer?" And now everywhere in the world we need computer. And so it's a great pleasure to present to the school this computer system that will help them with the work here with the children.